What motivates us to change? Changing in life is inevitable. It really is. The only thing we are guaranteed in life is that things are going to change. So trying to remain the same is essentially futile. But here's the real question, is what motivates us to change? How can we become a person that we really enjoy, and that like when we get to the end of our life, when we look back on it, that we live a fulfilled life, that we don't have any regrets, that we don't have a lot of shame and baggage. The baggage we have in life, we can't carry through death. That baggage is guilt, it's shame, it's resentments. We don't want any of these things. Now, I learn a lot from my past. It's part of what I believe is being addicted to life, is this massive reflection and trying to just get as much as we can from the teachings that God, that life is trying to give us. We will gain lessons out of our life, and we can even gain lessons out of other people's. Our life, though, I believe is specifically designed for our improvement. It's individualized. And it's amazing how it works, because it's as if these celestial hands are constantly molding us through the free will of ourselves and others. And this can only be a result of a very intelligent, benevolent force. Now, when I'm looking into my life and about this idea of change, there's a couple things that, I remember specifically. Like growing up, when I was a kid, it was like I just wanted acceptance. There was nothing more than I wanted was to be cool. I desperately wanted friends. That was the goal in life, was to have good friends and have lots of friends. As a result, I kind of broke away from who I was as a child. There are so many things that I thought were cool that when a older person or someone that I looked up to said wasn't, and so I changed my beliefs. I gave away a piece of who I was. Eventually, I started associating with different friend groups, some of which I forced my way into. And they weren't really my friends. They took advantage of me. They made fun of me. But I stayed there in pain because at least I had people around me. Eventually, I came upon this belief that I am Eric and I like to party. And I took pride in knowing that people looked at me like I was the crazy one, that you can't expect what this guy is going to do. He is a product of impulsivity. Yeah, it was very impulsive. And so when I went out and I thought fun equaled party, and party meant getting as messed up as you possibly can and acting crazy, that became who I was. That wasn't who I was, though. And I didn't realize this until, some might call it too late. Now, I went through a long period of drug abuse and alcohol abuse and ended up becoming homeless and in and out of jail more times than I can think of. I remember when Judge Trimmer, the Fairfield County, Ohio judge at the time, laid down my file, and it was about this thick, and it was so loud that it made a flutter sound, then a thump when it hit the judge's desk. Well, today, I believe that we can be addicted to life, and I wrote a book about it called Be Addicted to Life. And it tells stories about my past and the lessons that I've learned. So I went from being this person that loved to party and have a good time, and I ended up losing myself. And I realized that I lost myself one day when I was in Zephyrhills, Florida. I was in Zephyrhills, Florida, and I used to keep my money in this little tiny Bible. It's a little pocket-sized Bible. I actually have one in my truck right now. But I did this because when I was in jail, every time I went to jail, the only book, especially at the time, that I thought was even worth reading was the Bible. The reason why is because a book that's been around for thousands of years, has been read by centuries and decades and generations of people and picked apart. It has to be one of the wisest pieces of literature that has ever been on this planet. And so I figured that wisdom I could gain from, and it would be stupid of me not to read it. Now, sticking to those behavior patterns that I was supposed to was easier said than done. And so when I got out of jail this time in Florida, I decided to make sure that I put money in my Bible and I kept it as a wallet. Now, at this Speedway across the street from a Walmart, like I said, in Zephyr Hills, I had smoked some weed, and weed messed me up more than any other drug. I don't even know why, but this stuff would I would be so unaware of the world around me. It was, I can't do it. It's just one of those things that even when I was doing it, I knew I couldn't do it because I wasn't in the world anymore. Now, I shuffled into this gas station and I grabbed a drink and I started shuffling in to pay the register, the cash register. And when I did, I put my drink on the table, and then I pulled my money out of the Bible and I gave it to the cash register person, and then I said thank you, and I grabbed my drinks and I shuffled out. Now I'll never forget what I heard before I opened that door. The guy behind me says, "Man, can you believe how messed up that guy was?" And then the attendant said, "Yeah." And he kept his money in a Bible too. Now, it was at that moment that I realized that I wasn't who I really thought I was. And this opened a door for me. Well, it's one of my keys, which I call honesty. And later I end up getting clean and everything, and there's more to that story. However, it's important to know that in change, we first must know that who we are isn't who we really need to be or who we ought to be. Now, when I got out of rehab, I spent 5 months in jail, 4 months in rehab, and when I got out, there's something very important that I did, because I knew that I didn't know who I was going to be. I had vague ideas, but what I did know was who I wasn't. And I firmly believe that for us to change, we must first know who we aren't. Sometimes it's a lot easier to go through life knowing exactly what we hate and do not want around us. I don't know where I'm going to be, but I know what's not going to be there. And so this is the first thing that I really grasped onto about change, is that you got to know who you aren't. So that's the second part. First is being honest about who you are. And the second is about knowing who you aren't. So what motivates all of this change afterwards? Well, something that I did to protect myself was I changed my name. Well, I didn't change my name. I changed the spelling of it. So on my birth certificate, it's spelled E-R-I-C. Now, on social media, I decided, because I didn't want my old friends, I needed new friends. I didn't want my old friends to reach out to me. So I needed to protect myself and choose my new friends. Friends that I could look up to. Friends whose influence I would be molded and to be more like them. And that would be a good thing in life. So I changed my name to spelled A-I-R-E-K. So I went from Eric to Eric. And this really helped me out in life, getting to the next steps. So when we change and we start setting goals, we start getting away from not just who we aren't and start setting goals on things that we want to try. I want to experience a sunset. I want to run a marathon. I want to, make a big, I don't know what it is that you are interested in, but make a big list of all the things that you're interested in and tackle them one by one. Once you go through this step, then I believe you're going to be one step closer to becoming who you were meant to be. So I got to this point now where I started talking to you about pain in my past, about first going from who I was to who I wasn't out of a desire to have friends and this sort of thing. And I let go of vital pieces of who I was to being in pain because of that. And then that pain caused me to have to say, you know what, this isn't who I am. Who am I really? And being curious about this. So, is it pain that motivates change? Is that really what motivates? Is that the only thing that can motivate us to change? I don't think it has to be. I really don't. I think that in this special case, and I think for a lot of people, especially people that struggle with destructive forms of addiction, it gets to a point where we hate who we are. And it's that at that point, it gets a little easier to change. But what if I don't mind who I am? What if, I have some friends and, I have a job that I don't mind. It's not the greatest job in the world, but, it definitely isn't what I want to be doing. How do we change from something that's good to something that is great? Because good isn't painful. Yeah, I came from a spot of pain, and now I'm in a spot that is good. But how do I go from a spot that is good to a spot that is great? I believe this is through faith. I believe that when we have faith, that there is a loving creator, that there is a loving coach that is spiritually forming us through our will and others' will, because that's how great he is. And when we have faith and trust in that as we go through this process of getting away from the things that are not serving us anymore, we will eventually go from good to great. And this is the curiosity, this is the amazingness of what it is to be addicted to life. You accept the pain. Addiction is what addiction is. It's continuing down a path despite negative consequences. And there's always going to be negative consequences. But do we have the courage to get away from them? Do we have the courage to look towards something that is even better? So I want you to think about that. I want you to think about where you are in life. It might be a good spot, but do you have faith and do you trust that there could be a great spot destined for you, a place that was prepared for you? Because it's going to be a battle. No matter what, life is a battle. But you can be addicted to life.